Let's jump right here. This is the big one of the week. Ohio State survives Penn State 20-13. They get that win. Will Howard was really under the microscope in this game, as well as everybody else on this Ohio State team. I kind of put him on blast a bit here, Abe. Just for full disclosure, I said that this team they were expected to be a very good football team, right? That's what they are. They're a very good football team. But then there's that next level of like what an Ohio State team is supposed to be and what they're supposed to do on a week in, week out basis. And after they did what they did against Nebraska, which effectively was not much, they were kind of falling short of expectations. And then in this game, a lot of people started really questioning whether Ohio State was the team that was going to be up for the challenge to potentially contend for and win a national championship. They looked like they were skating through this one just a little bit. They never really pulled away at any point in this game. Penn State was always in and around this game. They always had an opportunity. Plus, you have Drew Aller, who is continuing to deal with this injury. And Will Howard was okay. He was fine. But more importantly, the rushing attack found its legs. They go for 179 yards in this one. 2013 winners. Ohio State reasserts its claim as one of the top dogs in the Big Ten Conference.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll get to Penn State and the questions James Franklin has to answer in a moment, because I know you have those questions, and you've continued to have those questions accurately since the start of the season. For Ohio State, there's this premise that they were this great team, right? They're one of the favorites to win a national championship. They go on the road. They lose in heartbreaking fashion to Oregon, but it's a close game. You still come out saying that's a darn good football team. They have not looked impressive since that game against Oregon, and certainly that Nebraska game that you referenced made you raise some eyebrows and say, hey, maybe Penn State's got a shot in this one. To the point where you say, hey, play this thing at night. Maybe it's a different outcome, a different officiating crew. Maybe it's a different outcome. But at the end of the day, Ohio State just feels slightly disconnected on offense. It doesn't feel like they're off by much, but, there's one play where Jeremiah Smith stops running and then has to restart his route. And it's like, man, if he keeps running, that's a touchdown. There's another play where you see Will Howard, and if the throw's slightly to the inside of the field instead of the outside, maybe that one's a touchdown. So things were just a smidge off in the pass game, and I think it affected the totality of that offensive performance from the Buckeyes. But in the key moments, right, and there were a couple of key moments, especially in the second half, a couple even right before halftime. But in the key moments, Ohio State won. And I think that was the real difference in this game. These two teams, for the most part, looked like relative equals. But in the very few key game-turning moments, it seemed like it was Ohio State coming out with the advantage more often than not. And that's quite frankly all that decided this game. It was very competitive. I think, look, I know where you're going to head, and I don't blame you for heading there. I thought this looked like a different Penn State team. I don't necessarily say they should feel ashamed with the outcome of this game, but you're still now left answering the same questions we thought you would have to answer. And at some point, that becomes a problem. I'll let you take it from there. I thought this was a good win for Ohio State. Not great, though.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're James Franklin, I mean, the pressure's been on him to really get over the hump against Ohio State and against Michigan. He won't have the opportunity to do that against Michigan this season, but he did have the chance to do this here against Ohio State. It's not acceptable to be very clearly little brother in this rivalry. He's 1-10 against Ohio State. He hasn't won this game since 2016. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I mean, Penn State seems like they are just mostly just okay with them skating by and just not being the team to get it done. But it's more just the fact that a lot of the problems that Penn State's had this season reared its ugly head again. It's whenever they just don't get that rushing attack going, there doesn't seem to be another option for them. And I'm looking specifically at Katrin Allen and Nicholas Singleton, who were downright dreadful in this game. I talked about Will Howard, and it's because I expect a whole heck of a lot from Will Howard, the Ohio State quarterback. He throws a pick six on his first pass attempt of this game, and then he was fine for the rest of the game. Like, he was okay. Like, considering the fact his offensive line is dreadful, Penn State wasn't really able to make them pay for it. But Penn State's rushing attack, I expected to be at least a little bit better in this game. Ohio State, one thing that they have done, we've talked about the offense specifically, but it's their inability to get off the ground. The defense for Ohio State is fantastic. Tyler Warren can't be leading you in rushing. That's unacceptable. Drew Aller can't be your second leading rusher. Katrin Allen and Nicholas Singleton need to be better. It's just too simple for them, because we saw that happen against USC. We saw it happen it happened against Wisconsin too. They weren't very good on the ground. I just, this is your identity. And if it's your identity and you don't do it effectively enough, I don't know who they are anymore. Maybe if Drew Aller was healthier, we'd be singing a different tune. Maybe this game would have gone just a little bit differently, but dude played the whole game. I can't give him too many excuses. And everyone's hurt. Everyone gets banged up. Things happen. And I'm impressed that he was even able to go in this game. But it's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. And until Penn State realizes that, they're just going to continue. I don't see them getting better. I mean, are they going to be better next year than they were this year? I don't know. But they're once again on the outside looking in on the Big Ten championship. Doesn't matter if they're divisions, doesn't matter what the formula is. It just seems like they're in the same spot. They're on a treadmill right now.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think you're right to an extent. At some point, I looked up Drew Aller was the leading rusher, and I think it was Singleton, although it may have been Allen, was the leading receiver. And I know over the course of that game, but yeah, I think the guys outside, they needed to step up. I don't know how much of this is on Drew Aller and the injuries. The receivers are not good enough, and
they're not getting open.
Yeah, I know.
It's Tyler Warren, and then it's a bunch of nobodies, and they're just sort of.
And that's not on Aller, and that's not necessarily on Singleton or Allen either. I mean, it becomes a point where Ohio State's able to play 4 defensive backs and put everyone else up in the box to stop the run. If you got 7 in the box, I don't know if we can blame Allen and Singleton. I agree. They need to be better. They need to run against loaded boxes. They've been doing it their whole careers. That should have been no different on Saturday, but you've got to get something going in the pass game, and it just wasn't there. I do want to say about Will Howard, he throws that early pick 6. They respond very well, and I do think you have to give them credit, because it felt like you're down that was 10-0, I think. And you're down immediately, and you're saying, man, if we go 3 and out here, we could be in real trouble on the road against the number 4, number 3 ranked team in the country. And he responded very well. They eventually took a 14-10 lead. And so I do want to give him credit for that. And they kind of coasted a little bit from there, but just a good response after a very costly mistake, and something that kind of made you open your eyes after the opening field goal for Penn State. And it says, oh boy, Buckeyes are already stepping in it, but they came out of that quite well. And yeah, look, it's not any more reassuring to sit here and say you guys looked more competitive against Ohio State this year than you had in recent years. And this one felt like it could have gone a different way if 1 or 2 calls had gone differently, or 1 or 2 moments had been in your favor. That doesn't help you out. And if you're James Franklin, it's still the same story. Yes, you were better. You were more competitive. You weren't completely run off the field by this team. But at the end of the day, you're Penn State. You're a top 5 team. There's no moral victories in a loss. No. You know, that can happen for other teams in different situations. It can't happen for you. So no matter how close this game felt, no matter how even this game felt, the same way there's no real moral victory for Ohio State when they lost to Oregon, there's no moral victory here for Penn State either. And yeah, I don't know what the answer is, you know, because there's only one other option, right? And that is at some point changing your head coach.
Yeah. I'm not calling for that. I just want to make sure.
And I don't know if Penn State fans should be either. And I understand what Penn State has been in the past. How many programs do we need to see fire a guy that's kind of getting it done to then just completely fall off? Like, yeah, maybe you fire Mark Richt and you find Kirby Smart and you become the program in college football, right? But like, there's so many more examples of guys that have been fired and the program has become completely non-existent. And I would be absolutely terrified if I were a Penn State fan. And I get it. You always think your school's going to make the right hire. You always think you get better. But man, oh man, you're one coach away from becoming what Nebraska was for 25 years. And it's just like Nebraska maybe now just finally feels like they're on the edge of getting back there from the Tom Osborne days. That was a long time, man. Like, you had a long time of being college football royalty that was in no man's land. And it'd be a shame to see Penn State fall the same way. And it's just like, man, that'd be terrifying for me.
Yeah, and that's the other thing with Nebraska. I do want to mention this too. Scott Frost was dreadful. They fired Bo Pelini back maybe a decade ago at this point, but then they just went into a dumpster fire. But Matt Rule, I will say this: he's now 0-7 against with Nebraska when they're trying to get to bowl eligibility. They lose again, and I just want to mention that really quickly. UCLA loses 27, or UCLA beats them 27-20. But the grass is not always greener for teams who want to fire their head coach. And I don't think that there is necessarily a path to getting better by firing James Franklin, because I think Penn State has reached this level of just solid football team. And especially if this new era of college football where you have this 12-team playoff, expectations have to change just a little bit, because winning a national championship is going to be a lot more difficult, but more teams are going to have a bite at that apple. And that's just sort of, it opens up the door for them. Now, if they lose another game this season, then you start chatting a little bit more. I don't think it's hot seat territory. I just think it's just a growing frustration that exists with the Penn State fan base. And you look at this schedule too, by the way, your best win right now is an Illinois team that's continuing to scuffle a little bit. You lose another game, they're not making the college football playoff. I would not be surprised if that happens, because Ohio State's in that sort of territory too. If Ohio State loses a second game, it's not really that good of a resume. You have a 1-point loss to Oregon. You have a tight win on the road against Penn State. That's great. Then you might have a loss to Indiana later on this season. Assuming that happens, it's just sort of top heavy in the Big Ten. A lot of those middling teams, the teams that could be contending for at-large bids in the Big Ten Conference, they're not really looking nearly as good as you would want them to. I'm looking at USC. I'm looking at Illinois. I'm looking at Nebraska, which has continued to falter here as of late. But your mid-level, your top-level teams, though, continue to be really good. And then the rise of Indiana has been very pleasant to see. But